Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
What is one country that you will never visit again? Egypt, as many have said. Cairo looks like is a war zone. Turrets on street corners, tanks, soldiers with automatic weapons everywhere. We had an armed police officer on the tour bus, Rhodes Scholar, and nothing against them. They're a great company to travel with. A police escort everywhere, bomb dogs, and a guy with a mirror looking under the bus for bombs. Cairo is dirty, littered, and poverty is staggering. The food was meh at best, as we could not travel outside the hotel or tour path to eat. It was blisteringly hot. The camel guys at the pyramids were mean to all of the women and the animals, with children working there as well. The Egyptian Museum was a disgrace to the county. Poorly organized, bad labels, no security, priceless textiles, parchments, leather, etc. jumbled in cases exposed to the air, heat hands. No AC. The only things well cared for and secured were Tutankhamun's artifacts. It's a spectacular resource and collection, and so badly cared for with no curation. The new one just opened. I sure hope it's better. Once you've seen one temple, one hieroglyphic, you've truly seen them all. It's all about tourist dollar, and the street vendors were relentless and scary. Even on a nice open boat ride down the Nile, kids paddled up to the boat on wooden doors, selling cheap stuff or just begging. Never again. The Gambia in West Africa. I've traveled to over 40 countries in my life, including Egypt, Morocco, India, and Cameroon, and the Gambia is by far the worst of the bunch. I went there in 2009 with my girlfriend. We were 20 at the time. It is by far the most corrupt country in the world. Let me start by saying it's a beautiful country, and the people there are the friendliest people you could wish to meet. But the way they are treated by the government is disgusting. We met a local guy there called Jimmy Brave who lived in a hut on the beach with his young family. Amazing guy. Cooked us dinner every night and never wanted anything but friendship in return. We have him a fair bit of money on our last day. More than we usually would, because he genuinely didn't want it. Anyway, one night we decided we wanted to check out the nightlife in the tourist area where it was safe. So my friend Jimmy agreed to meet us by the hotel entrance at 7 p.m. Then we would take him for dinner and hit a few bars. We got to the front of the hotel just before 7 p.m. and Jimmy wasn't there. We waited around an hour, still no Jimmy. At this point, we assumed he had forgotten, so we went back out of the rear exit onto the beach and to his hut. His wife said he had gone to meet us over an hour ago. We searched for about 4 hours and still couldn't find him, so his wife suggested we call the local tourist police. We called, and they confirmed he had been arrested for loitering in front of the hotel. We agreed to meet the head of police and arrived at the police station. This is where it got shady. We went in and sat at a desk in an empty dark room. A bug African guy in army clothing came in and sat in front of us. The guy had 2 cigs in his mouth, smoking both at the same time. He slammed his fist on the table and started shouting at us, demanding 500 pounds, probably a year's wages over there, to release Jimmy. Obviously, we refused. After about an hour of arguing and various threats against us, we were a young white couple at the time, and they assumed we were wealthy. We managed to agree on 70 pounds and a 200-pack of cigs. We paid and were told to wait outside. We were out there for over 2 hours, and they brought the wrong guy out. We only knew our friend as Jimmy Brave, not his real name, so this proved challenging. Anyway, I was invited in to show the police who Jimmy was and had to pick him out of a huge cell filled with at least 300 people, some who were very close to death. Anyway, Jimmy spotted me straight away, and we had him released. When we got far enough away from the police station, Jimmy broke down in tears. I've never seen a grown man cry like this in my life. He lifted up his top, and he had several large open wounds where they had been whipping him in the cell and the police truck. We immediately took him to hospital where he remained for 2 days at a cost of £240-ish. The hospital doctors were great. So bear in mind he was beaten/whipped around 50 times hard, just waiting outside our hotel to take us for drinks. And he was only released because we paid. If we had never turned up, he said, he would have died in there. They don't release the criminals until somebody pays the corrupt police chief. There were people literally dying in front of my eyes in the cell. I've always swore if I become rich, I will be going back there just to release as many of these people as I possibly can, except any dangerous people who actually deserve to be there, obviously. This wasn't the only corruption from the police we seen while there, it's just the main point. We seen police walking down the street slapping women and kids for absolutely no reason. One police officer told me he would murder anyone I point out right now for 50 pounds. He had an AK-47. I saw people dragged in the back of trucks never to be seen again just to ask people for a bottle of water. I feel really sorry for the majority of the population in Senegambia, as they are amazing, happy people who have to live in constant fear of the police/government. Edit. I forgot to mention that Jimmy managed to move to the UK in 2016 with the help of me and another British family he met in the Gambia. He now lives in Stoke-on-Trent, which is a few hours from where I live, but we talk on Facebook regularly and meet up once or twice a year. Our UK friends, 4 females, decided to visit Sharm el-Sheikh. So, 3 of us, 1 female, 2 males from the US decided to tag along in 2007. We were all in our mid-20s. This was when they were still rebuilt from the 2005 bombing, so things were new and clean. Anytime we left the resort, we had a bodyguard/photographer. We all had a point-and-shoot camera and didn't think to just use one camera. Poor bodyguard. I didn't realize how bad an experience it could have been for us then. One day we did a camel ride and snorkeled. The hotel provided us with a lunch bag. When we arrived at the snorkeling place, I was the last to get out of the van and was swarmed with pushy kids trying to either sell things or beg for things. I gave them our lunch bags so that I could get away from them. It was such a sad moment. Then looking back at pictures, during a day trip to Cairo, I was in a picture with a worker from one of the shops the tour guide took us to, and his hand is basically touching the side of my breast. Not to mention, every one of us got food poisoning at various times. Looking back, I was so naive, unaware, and didn't ask questions. Just went with the flow with everything. I was only able to have a wonderful time with then friends because of our bodyguard. I am so grateful for him. I can only imagine what could have happened to us after reading this thread. I am so sorry for the horrendous things that has happened to so many women. Egypt. I visited Sharm el-Sheikh back in 2015. The hotel area was amazing. I vaguely remember it being called the Baron, and you felt like a king there. But that was it. As soon as you leave the hotel area, you feel like you're in a war zone. Trash everywhere, barely laid roads. Nothing to go look at outside of the hotel, apart from stuff they sold to you as a day trip. Snorkeling, camel riding, going out in the desert with a quad bike. It did not feel right to be there. Every time I went to buy water in a shop, the price would go up each day. They would tell you a price, many times 2 or 3 times the price you paid the day before, and you'd need to haggle them down. I ended up saying that I'd pay a certain amount and not more. When they said no, I'd leave the shop and they'd come chasing after me, saying, okay, we can do pound X.XX. It was stressful to be there. If I wanted to enjoy myself, I'd stick to my hotel room, the pool, or the beach and ignore the people trying to sell me stuff on the beach. I was the only one in the group of 5 people who didn't enjoy it. But I don't see the joy in having to haggle my way through the day and having seen everything after the second day. I don't think people realize how impoverished a lot of Jamaica is. I'll never go back there either. I had a driver try to extort money from me on my honeymoon. The lady that set up the transportation at our resort was in it. The driver accosted my wife demanding money for a previous ride he had given us but abandoned us, so we had to find our own way back to the resort. I told my wife to go into the airport, and he and I exchanged words. He wanted the money for the return trip plus extra because he drove to pick us up for no reason. Mind you, we waited over an hour for him. Once he realized I wasn't going to back down, and I wasn't afraid of him calling the police officers, he backed down and left. Haiti. Went and did medical relief in a field hospital after the earthquake. Recent stuff aside, that country is and has been ducked. Poor infrastructure, poor education, no significant industries, no natural resource advantage, corrupt government, polarized political climate. Island nation, so all imports are more expensive. Poor medical system. Anything a country needs to get a leg up is just non-existent. I'm a pretty positive person and met the loveliest people there, but I've never been more depressed or pessimistic about a place's future. Haiti. Went on a medical mission. One day was spent at the beach. We got caught in the middle of a protest. I was groped. Several other people were punched. It was terrifying. They only stopped when one of our translators yelled that we were medical workers. We only ended up spending 1 hour at the beach, so we wouldn't end up driving back through the same area at night. When we reached that area, it was clear of people. A few overturned vehicles were on fire. A UN detail was hanging out in a big armored vehicle with an exceptionally large gun on top. I can't imagine how awful it must be now with all of the civil unrest. Also went to Haiti on a medical mission. Stay away from PAP. I didn't see a whole lot of the country, but I will never, ever go back. Learned that the Kingston Charcoal Company had bought almost every stick of wood in the whole country to turn into charcoal briquettes. The place was a humanitarian disaster, and then it got leveled by an earthquake. Watched WHO-donated supplies get sold out the back of the supply trailer. Can't fix this guy's shoulder that has been dislocated for 3 weeks because his family can't afford to buy the Valium to sedate him a little so we can put his shoulder back. It's a 2-minute procedure. Can't amputate this maggot-infested limb. Why? It's Sunday. We don't operate on Sunday. Oh, now that his leg has been amputated, he hasn't received pain medication for 3 days and wants to know why we cut his leg off. Why? His family can't afford $5 worth of Percocet. I'm not cut out for disaster relief work. Perhaps I could make some kind of difference for that man. Monsieur Michel. I cut his tibia off myself. A nurse, with something called a Geely saw. There isn't anything funny about removing someone's limb without anesthesia. The CRNA gave him just enough ketamine that maybe he wouldn't remember. 10 years later, I remember the raw, fish moss surface of his stump. So over the nerves, or they'll sing with pain every time this man goes to move his aching toes and then remembers that they're gone. We threw his left lower leg out back in a blue plastic bag with the rest of the limbs that had been amputated that week. I remember a pile of blue plastic lumps. It was about chest high. I wonder if that kind orthopedic surgeon I went with remembers too. 10 years later, I can see, smell, and taste every searing moment of that week. I am not cut out for disaster relief. I don't even know what good could come from this story. Less K's, Haiti. Less K's. Yeah, my country of Mongolia is not on here, or maybe because not many people go there to begin with. Edit. Thank you, everyone. Lots of lovely messages. Mongolia is one of the last frontiers in Eurasia. In fact, people call it the Wild East sometimes. Still unspoiled and raw, especially the countryside. People are not ruined by tourism yet, and not too bothered by race or creed. Culturally not quite Central Asian nor Southeast Asian, with a healthy admixture of ex-Soviet country mentality and some liberal Western sensibilities. Politically free democracy, which seems to be rare in our neighborhood, but rife with corruption too. Economically, it is still developing, but you'll get broadband and 3G, 4G almost everywhere. Quite safe for tourists, apart from petty crime, but not everyone speaks English, so I suggest you hire a guide beforehand. I suppose that's it. If you have any more questions, I suggest you head to /Mongolia. Cheers. I lived in South Africa last year for COVID relief. I hate Joburg. I serve in the military, and it felt worse than deployments as at least there I had armor and a rifle. I dressed like a poor college student and bought 20 cheap $8 Casio watches, so they at least felt like they robbed me, they got something. I would be clearly wearing an aid group shirt and still was targeted. In my culture, you're meant to fight the thief lest they try to rob you again, but in South Africa, you just get cell phone insurance, hand over your cell, watch, and I had a spare disposable wallet and hope if you comply they don't murder you. I left as soon as I got the chance. I grew up and lived in RSA and was fortunate enough to immigrate to the USA. Although there's a lot to love about the country, if I never have to go back there, it wouldn't bother me in the least. We still have family there, so we go back to see them. The problem is not that it's not an interesting and beautiful country, but the problem is that the people that live there have adapted to a level of crime and violence that is insane. Things like avoiding areas altogether, not walking anywhere in the evenings, trying to prevent stopping at traffic lights, robots. In the evenings, living in a secure complex, having electrified fencing, and private security are all examples of everyday life in RSA. If you live overseas, chances are all of those are very foreign concepts. Edit. In South Africa, traffic lights are referred to as robots. There are not killer robots at night that prevent you stopping at a red light. Jamaica. Went for a chill vacation with my then college girlfriend and were very turned off by being asked if we wanted to buy weed every 20 steps. Despite popular misconceptions, weed was quite illegal in Jamaica at the time. I smoked at home in the US occasionally, but wasn't into it this trip and didn't want to risk getting arrested in a foreign country. 3 days in, and they're wearing us down, so we consider buying a joint. That same day, a tour guide on our river tour warns us without prompting that dudes will sell you weed and then cross the street to tell the police officers, for an informant fee, that you've got weed, after which you get tossed in Jamaican jail and have to bribe your way out. Also, the food was meh. Egypt seems to be mentioned a bunch so far, and I'd like to plus 100 that. I've traveled to over 15 countries, and Egypt was the first that came to mind when I saw the title. A nice man sitting next to me on a bus to Cairo had the shit kicked out of him by police at the Suez Canal checkpoint. They literally were punching him in the face as hard as they could while he was in the chair next to me, begging them to stop until they dragged him off, never to be seen again, probably. Like people are bashing Morocco because of beggars or annoying negotiating tactics. But in Morocco, I at least never once feared for my safety or the safety of my group once while in Morocco. You can travel to that country relatively freely and have decent enough time if you go to the right spots, and have a meh time if you go to the wrong ones. Egypt crosses a different line, especially given the fact it is still considered somewhat a tourist destination and not lumped in with Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. I'd definitely say it should be widely considered and grouped closer to Afghanistan or Syria than, say, Israel or Turkey. The pyramids area was absolutely disgusting. So many people there cheated on you, mistreated camels, little children crawling through garbage piles. If you are a woman or have a woman in your group, then it's even worse. It is impossible to stay out past sunset as the danger and sketch levels go to 100. And I'm not just being sensitive. People assault and harass women. They'll berate you, etc. I was so lucky I looked Egyptian, according to them, while I was there, and it still didn't help much. Hate Egypt, man. My good friend is Egyptian. Amazing history, some great people for sure, but hate that place. And he agrees 100%, especially since he's a Coptic Christian. Two good things there. Great swimming and chilling on the Sinai. Went to Berswear near Israel, and it was not bad at all. Some of the museums were pretty cool. As a guy who was born and raised in Egypt then moved to the US, I'm usually that Egyptian friend that others would rely on to navigate through the endless hassle that is Egypt. Honestly, and as much as I like my friends and would do anything to protect them, it's so exhausting. The second time someone asked when I will be going back to Egypt, so they can time their visit with my annual vacation, I was like, can you just please not go? LOL. What they don't get is that it's actually quite hard to play that role if you're Egyptian too. It's not like street vendors would respect you and leave your friends alone. They would still get mad and would even direct their anger at the Egyptian in the group for not helping them make a living by fooling naive foreigners. They make it like you're not loyal to your origins or something. Sometimes their first assumption is that you're some tour guide. One guy even tried to bribe me to help him sell some stuff to my friend. Also, harassment does affect every woman in Egypt, including my Egyptian friends and relatives. The only difference is that they don't have the choice to not go back. So, yes, I wouldn't want to spend my vacation fending off street vendors too, LOL. I mean, if it weren't for the fact that my family still live there, I wouldn't go back myself. Well, maybe like every 5 years or so, cause honestly the food is just freaking amazing. Cambodia kinda same for me. I was mugged too, but in Colombia, which I'd probably go to again. I just found Cambodia sad and unsettling. A brutal recent history and a country that kind of has extraordinarily little, so virtually all you encounter is set up to appeal to tourists. Drunken Europeans and Americans walking around partying with a local girl under their arm. Everywhere I went to was like fighting off women, trying to give you a successful conclusion massage. Every cabbie and tuk-tuk driver trying to sell you drugs and women. I was only there a week and didn't go too far out of Siam Reap and Phnom Penh, so certainly there's more to the country outside those cities, but the whole experience just bummed me out.
I'm fat, black, and none too cute. Older people spit at me. No one would sit next to me on the train, or would make it painfully obvious they were uncomfortable during rush hours. Young people, adults/teens/older kids, had no filter and would happily laugh at, make faces, or even throw things at me, though that was only in Shibuya. It was hard for me to get work as a teacher, even with my training and credentials, because I had to have my picture and no one wanted a black and ugly teacher. I felt like a monster the entire time and slowly shut myself away until I had quit my job and only left at night to get food from a convenience store. The last time I went outside during the day in Japan, I was going to cancel my cell phone plan before I left, and their kids/teens pointed and laughed before running away screaming I was a monster. I was mortified when the adults looked at me, and I could hear them go, "Well, look at her." It took me 4 months back home to leave my apartment during the day in the States. I didn't go thinking I'd be loved. I just thought I'd have a wonderful experience in my 20s. Japan is a modern, beautiful country with some wonderful people, but I just didn't get lucky enough to meet them. My pet peeve is when I mention this, people go, "Oh, Japan was great to me. You must have done something wrong." I'm glad you had an enjoyable time. I hope the next person has a wonderful time too, but this happened to be my experience. That's all. Edit. I typed this and then went out, so I'm surprised at the replies. I know it's cliché, but thank you for all the understanding replies and awards. Reddit, y'all alright. Edit 2. If you want to go to Japan, please try it. I am not trying to say this will 100% be your experience. I'm also not trying to say that the whole country is terrible or that people's good experiences aren't valid. Also, people who are saying it's most likely the wait. I mean, I'm sure it didn't help, and I am working on it. Going to go with the crowd here and agree that I wouldn't go to Egypt again. I absolutely love ancient Egypt, but I still wouldn't go back. I went when I was 15 as part of a school trip. Imagine 25 high school students and 4 chaperones, none of whom speak the language, with one guide dedicated to taking us on our entire 11-day trip. There was definitely the bartering talk for some of the girls in the group, which we were told were just jokes and compliments from the locals. There were cons. One student got on a camel at the pyramids for X amount, but once he was up there the guide wouldn't let him down until he paid twice that. Camels are freaking tall, so it's not like he could easily/safely climb or jump down. There were groups of kids in a lot of the markets who would offer beads or other small bits of touristy scrap for free. Somehow several of the people in my group who took those beads ended up losing their wallets in the same market. That's a real head-scratcher. Cairo itself was unfortunately disgusting. The streets and canals are filled with trash, and not only normal city trash, but there was also more than one beast of burden left in a ditch to rot. We were told not to drink the water. Even brushing our teeth, we were told to use bottled water. And to use hand sanitizer after washing our hands. On the trains, the bathrooms don't go to a holding tank, they just open to the track below, which reminds me of a scene from one of the Mummy movies now that I think of it. On a personal note, when we were at the Sphinx, I got separated from the rest of my group, a 15-year-old girl alone in a country where I didn't speak the language. My group had moved ahead in line. They ended up being several hundred meters ahead. I got a bit scared because I searched and couldn't find anyone, and so I approached an armed guard, which appeared to be a security type. I had seen them at several other historic monuments too, and asked if he could help get me to my group. On the way to my group, he groped me. I was absolutely shocked. This was in broad daylight, amid a crowd of other people. Mind, they weren't looking at us. They were looking at the ancient piles of rocks. Not to mention, he had a fairly large gun, so that added to the intimidation factor. But I just let it happen because he was at least taking me in the direction I knew my group was. The first person from my group I saw was my, at the time, ex, and I had never ever been so glad to see him in my life. I still love the history of Egypt, but I don't think I'll ever actually go back. Egypt, but more specifically Cairo. The way they treat women and their own people is honestly heartbreaking and disgusting. I have never wanted to be out of a country so fast in my life. A friend of mine was groped on the bus, and a fellow student told her, "That is what you get for not riding the all-female bus." I never felt safe, and I constantly felt sorry for almost everything I saw. The poor, the animals, the women. It honestly was devastating. Edit. I've gotten some comments or messages about depends on where you go, and where you stay is just as high there as it is in other countries. I am a female that was traveling with my good friend, who is a local from Madi. I wore pants and conservative clothing to respect the culture. We even had a driver and male Egyptian friends escorting us, and still had issues. They told us to never be without an escort. Ever. Yes, Alex and Ahab are beautiful, but the experience as women doesn't change drastically from Cairo. The country is rich in history and has some great diving. But the behavior from many males and the infrastructure is weird. If you're interested in learning something new, look up Garbage City in Cairo. That should give you an idea of some of the poverty levels happening there. As an Egyptian woman, I want to say, firstly, I am 10,000% sorry for every human being victimized by someone in Egypt. On behalf of Egyptian women everywhere, thank you for sharing your stories. Your stories are our stories. These things happen to us all the time. But the women here are numb to it or condemned for speaking up. We try to communicate with the outside world on the issue of women's rights, harassment, but with the spoken and written language barrier, it makes it exceedingly difficult to get our stories out. Egypt needs this rude awakening. Tourism will suffer, and they cannot afford to have that happen. We need to take responsibility and make some fundamental changes. Edit. I am choosing to no longer respond to comments because I have had some strange encounters from a few. I am aware that this post has been reposted directly on Egyptian tourism channels, and I am now receiving a ton of comments questioning me on personal matters, my location, my travel, my education, my family, as well as questioning the validity of my experiences. Everyone is within their right to ask whatever question they may have, but I fear that perhaps this might be a ploy to get pieces of information about me and my family to find my identity. For this, I am feeling an overwhelming fear. So, I will stop commenting from now, but I will continue to read. For those not living in Egypt, I very much want to thank everyone for your kind words and support. I mostly write on these forums because I am able to express myself openly and honestly in a way that I've never experienced before, and it is very therapeutic. Thank you for giving me the space to do that. For the Egyptians that have commented, many of you are so understanding, humble, and kind. You welcome my intense commentary and show me absolute love and care. This gives me hope because I know the good that is Egyptian people. I want the world to see this too. We have to stand for what's wrong and act with our moral compass first. May God help Egypt and its people. This makes me so sad to read. My mom has always been obsessed with Egypt and has been there quite a few times back before I was born and a couple times when I was young. I grew up hearing stories about the pyramids and the tombs, watching documentaries, and playing any game that was Egypt-themed together. I always imagined one day I would be able to go there and finally be able to share in the wonders with her, but for the last few years I have heard only negative things, and I fear I'll never be able to go there, especially as a single woman.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.